Crève la bulle, l'Europe c'est de la bombe.
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 Aujourd'hui, crève la bulle, l'Europe c'est de la bombe. Commémore cette terrible journée de 2016 où l'Europe fut frappée en son cœur. Un an après, crève la bulle se retrouve au même endroit, dans ce cœur de l'Europe, où Bruxelles m'appelle, je suis Bruxelles, j'en ai assez, résonne encore comme un glas qui nous rappelle que le vivre ensemble et la démocratie sont encore fragiles au XXIe siècle. Où en sommes-nous après ces attentats? Où en sommes-nous face à ce défi du djihad et du radicalisme au niveau européen? Dans le cadre de la présentation de leur livre, The European Foundation for Democracy, EPC et Counter-Extremism Project vont nous dévoiler ce qui a été fait un an après et ce qui trace les politiques futures. Crève la bulle est là pour vous accompagner.
Crève les bulles, l'Europe c'est de la bombe.
Today is a very important day. It's important that we do not forget what happened a year ago in Brussels airport at the metro station of Malbec on 22nd of March 2016. It's important that policymakers, governments, officials, but the public at large realize that we're facing an unprecedented threat. It's also important that we look at this threat in a composed, in a rational way, that we're not just attacked by, feel under attack and are scared and react with emotions and fear. Europe is very strong. Europe is based on important values of civil liberties, democracy, human rights, gender equality. Europe is what will keep us together and what will give us and is giving us the tools to address this threat in a correct way, and that is being aware but not just reacting with violence, racism or fear.
1 year ago, Belgium suffered the worst terrorist attacks committed on its territory in the country's modern history, when 3 bombs were detonated in the departure hall of Zaventem Airport and at the Malbec metro station. A stone's throw away from the EU institutions. I just took the metro and we stopped at Malbec station. A station I know very well, being next to the headquarters of my party. Since the Madrid bombing of 2004, there has been dozens of terrorist attacks in Europe, elsewhere and in the world, including in France, in Germany, Turkey and Tunisia, which have claimed hundreds of lives and raised the spectrum of an invisible and murderous threat in the form of jihadist terrorism. These were attacks on the values of our civilization by fanatics who want to destroy our way of life and set up a clash of civilizations. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point I would like us to take a moment to remember and honor the victims of these grievous terrorist atrocities. I propose 1 minute of silence, of thoughts and prayers.
As we face the threat of terrorist radicalization, it is clear to law enforcement agencies, to civil society organizations, as well as media and policymakers, that a comprehensive counter-terrorism strategy requires a comprehensive approach. We're no longer in a situation as in the past where in which repressive measures, security approach could actually play a role. It is clear that repressive measures alone cannot work, and all actors, all players need to be involved as comprehensive counter-terrorist strategies are being developed and implemented.
I often think at the words of the famous writer Amos Oz. Criminals are seeking a cause, sometimes a religious cause. True believers are not tempted by crime. While some of the attacks were carried out by lone wolves, others were well coordinated, complex attacks by groups of militants. While some had been under surveillance, many others were regarded by the authorities as small-time troops, such as in the case of the recent terrorist attack on Paris Orly Airport. Irrespective of this, all recent attacks have highlighted the growing phenomenon of jihadist radicalisation. The EPC-EFD project and the resulting publication on the challenge of jihadist radicalisation for the EU and beyond follows a series multi-stakeholder events that took place throughout 2016 and provides policy recommendations for the EU and its member states in order to address jihadist radicalisation. The EU has a valuable role to play in terms of our ability to prevent and disrupt terrorist activity, and in bringing the perpetrators, the instigators, the backers and recruiters and financiers to justice.
Reducing access to terrorist content online is only part of the answer. We also need to counter and undermine the terrorist narrative by providing positive alternatives. Again, in my view, it's civil society partners rather than governments who are best placed to do this, not least because the target audience aren't really interested in hearing from governments. They often mistrust any official messaging. To support this effort, just last week we launched a civil society empowerment program to equip civil society partners with the necessary skills and technical expertise that they need to provide positive alternative narratives online. I hope these efforts will go some way to strengthen resilience against online propaganda and bolster critical thinking, in particular amongst our young people, who need to be better equipped to distinguish fact from propaganda and to see that there is an alternative, that they do belong, and that there is a future for them within our societies. Today's book rightly focuses on some of the priority countries outside the EU, where we have worked with partners on to boost our cooperation on counter-terrorism, particularly on capacity building. We're working to ensure that these efforts are delivered effectively and as quickly as possible, including strengthening international political dialogues on terrorism, deploying counter-terrorist experts in our EU delegations, and developing and implementing action plans involving EU agencies like Europol, the European Police College, the European Border and Coast Guards. An important element of all of this is including counter-violent extremism as part of our dialogue with our close third country partners. In fighting extremism, it's essential that our efforts are proportionate. Otherwise, we risk doing the extremists' job for them by constraining our freedoms and dividing our communities. So the focus needs to be on bringing different communities together, increasing their resilience, and empowering them to isolate and marginalise those who advocate violent extremism. And to do this, we also need to focus on addressing the social and economic inequalities that can provide a breeding ground in which violent extremism is able to take hold. This is both domestically as well as in our support to third countries. That means enlisting not only all our communities, but also mobilising education, employment and other policies as part of this fight. Tackling radicalisation needs to be and to remain at the forefront of our efforts to combat terrorism, because prevention is always better than cure. So I welcome this book and the light that it shines on one of the most important but sometimes underrated aspects of our counter-terrorism effort.
What the European policy in terms of coordination, because we see a lot of doing by the Belgian government, the French government, in their coordination, and to tackle also the issue of the single market and the freedom of movement between those individuals that are more well known.
We have sought to reinforce the controls that are exercised at point of entry, point of arrival. So, as I mentioned, we have the European Border and Coast Guards. We have now deployed, for the first time, representatives of Frontex and of Europol to help and assist the member state authorities, in particular in Greece and in Italy, to do the kind of in-depth controls that are appropriate when you're dealing with a large flow of people, sometimes difficult to identify. And that means professional first and second interviews for anyone who gives cause for concern. We've also seen an increase in the amount of information that is shared by member states. They will have got that from various sources, including some international sources that Gilles will talk about in a moment. But they are sharing that information now much more effectively than perhaps was the case 2 or more years ago. And that means that those who are doing the controls at the point of entry have much more information on which they can draw if they are trying to identify potentially people who might cause concern. You are right that you need to mobilize as much as you can intelligence as part of this work. I'm struck that it's sometimes suggested that European intelligence services don't work together, don't share intelligence. As far as I'm aware, as far as I'm concerned, that's not true. European intelligence services are working together.
The challenge is indeed to get as much information as possible on people who very often travel undocumented or with false documents or stolen documents. So we've been very active in recent months in the hotspot that the Commissioner alluded to, where we try to put together all the security players, Europol, Eurojust, Frontex and EASO, the agency for asylum, as well as member state liaison officers. That's quite interesting. The current presidency, Maltese presidency, raised the issue at the informal meeting in Malta recently, so that we have standard operating procedures on the security check. We all use the same database. So that's one. The second one, we need to collect data on people we don't know. So what we have done is first to try to put someone from Europol in the platform of the anti-ISIL coalition located in Jordan, where they get data from the battlefield, because it's very important that as soon as, let's say, an operation in Mosul, they collect forensic data on a computer, which is seized, data on iPhone, or fingerprints on a non-exploded devices, that can be sent immediately and shared with all the members of the anti-ISIL coalition, and that at the border they have these fingerprints so that they can check whether this person who is maybe applying for asylum is maybe someone who was involved in the fight alongside Daesh. So data from the battlefield is of critical importance. Biometrics. We are now working hard to start feeding and querying the different databases with biometrics. We're not very advanced, because so far it's mainly alphanumerical data. So in the coming months, we will see more and more member states sharing biometrics data, mainly facial image, because if the fingerprints is the biometric data of the 19th century and DNA of the 20th century, the 21st century is image. And that's very important. So that's the second one. The third one is to encourage all the MENA countries, all the countries around the Mediterranean, to feed more Interpol, because Interpol is the only tool we have in common. And the more they do share information with Interpol, the more we will benefit from that. We are currently asking our colleagues at the border to systematically query Interpol, not only the lost and stolen travel document, but the red notice, the black notice, because there are people who are considered to be dead, they are not dead, and so forth. So I was in Malta some days ago at a seminar organized with the Americans, where we worked hard with all the countries around the Mediterranean on this type of issue. And finally, as the Commission said, we have a very close relationship with the Americans. Our security service have their own close relationship, but we have different means, and the Americans have offered to be connected to several databases they have.
We started this process over a year ago with the first event exactly a year ago on March 22nd at 10 a.m. in the morning, 2 hours after the first bombing. It is a little different from many policy publications, I think, because of our cooperation with EPC. EPC is one of Europe's leading think tanks, and we're the European Foundation for Democracy. We're an NGO that does policy work but also project work. So we work with refugees and teachers and social workers on prevention, on integration, and I think this also creates some sort of interesting mix that you not necessarily find in every regular policy document. We start with Elham Manea, who looks at the ideology. Roberta highlighted that role already. We think that this is a driving factor. If you look at all the different root causes and pathways and backgrounds of people who become involved in this kind of terrorism, one thing that they all have in common is that they believe into something. So saying this is not relevant because they are not experts on religion or they're not scholars in ideology is something that we disagree with, and say this is one of the few things all the terrorists with an Islamist background maximize intra-EU cooperation. Cooperation is the big word. There's a lot of progress that has been made in the last 12 months, in the months before that, but of course there's still a lot to do. Improve countering extremist propaganda and promoting alternative narratives is also a key point in this book. Ideas matter, they shape reality, they're connected to the ideological question. And yes, alternative and counter narratives I think can work. The industry now is really committed to doing disrupting propaganda more effectively, employing algorithms. There are some existing mechanisms already at play that take down child pornography, for example, on the web. It's an algorithm called PhotoDNA, developed by Hani Farid, a scientist in the US. He has joined up with a counter-extremism project, our partner, and they have developed an algorithm called eGlyph. eGlyph takes down the worst of the worst online if you want to deploy it. This is not a matter of free speech, really. This will be, I mean, it has to be implemented in a proper way, like everything, but it's taking down pictures and audio and video that has been flagged before, that has been identified as the worst of the worst, where 99% here in this room would agree that this should not be seen by anyone. This can be taken down already. There's technology, there are organizations that have developed this. This is ongoing in the field of child pornography, and now the industry has committed on also doing something similar, and we're happy to see the results. In this case, it seems that civil society was actually had a first mover advantage. Fostering liberal democracy, critical thinking, going back to schools and universities, teaching more philosophy, making people aware of how to think, not necessarily what to think, is a big picture approach that we still think is relevant. And empowering civil society has made it into every speech of the Commission in this context, and other experts, which we really appreciate, and everybody in the room does. The question is how to do that. We cannot leave the protection of the society and the strengthening of resilience to the state. It's one of its core tasks to do, but how to empower the right parts of civil society to be more resilient towards threats. And my dear colleague Roberta mentioned the empowerment of critical voices within communities that are vulnerable to radicalization.
It has actually done amazing work in terms of exposing the role and the negligence to a certain extent of social media companies that have failed for a long time to block Twitter is one, but the block online propaganda. And that's where I believe that the three organizations working together can actually even strengthen the ability to connect, continue to raise awareness, and hopefully to reach out increasingly to communities that we define as at-risk communities.
What I would like to achieve, is to have an automatic detection in the first place, not a human detection, but an automatic detection, not removal, not automatic removal, it will raise issue of free speech, but detection of unlawful material. And I think we can maybe be there at some stage. And for those who follow the debate in the UK this week, it was extremely interesting to see major private companies deciding to stop financing the internet companies because of the content which is posted by the platform, right-wing, hatred and all that stuff. And what was the reaction of the CEO of Google? Very quickly one, we said, we are speeding up our work on artificial intelligence, we'll reach that stage very soon. So this is possible. Let's go there.
The 22nd of March 2016, our society was torn. We knew for some time that our country was at risk of a terrorist attack. We had already experienced the attack on the Jewish Museum. It was the day before our elections, the 24th of May 2014. And it was also here in Brussels. And since the atrocities of November 2015 in Paris, we also knew that the Islamic State changed their modus operandi from more or less targeted terrorism, for instance Jewish targets, to random acts of violence. Nevertheless, we still lived under the illusion that the worst would never happen, until that tragic day 1 year ago in March, the day that our society forever lost its innocence. Bombs went off in the departure hall at Brussels airport, and merely 1 hour later, bombs exploded at the subway station of Bulle, very close to this place. I have to say, immediately after the attacks, I managed to turn off my emotions for hours, or at least I had to, because as Minister of the Interior, one is expected to react quickly and make difficult decisions that day. That night, when I went to bed, I relived the events in my mind. It was only at that time that I allowed my emotions to surface. I felt emotions of anger, but also of incomprehension. How is it possible that young people who grew up here and were given opportunities would turn their backs on our society? How can a human being change his way of thinking and behaving in such a way as to not only propagate the use of violence, but also use that violence against innocent victims? During interviews, journalists sometimes ask me, is Molenbeek still the heart of jihadism in Europe? I don't know. I don't know if this was ever the case, and I don't know if it is today. What I do know, however, is that two things are very important. First, the rule of law in municipalities such as Molenbeek needs to return. And second, we need to do our very best to regain the hearts and minds of these youngsters that are on their way to radicalization. And we are working very hard on this, but regaining hearts and minds requires patience. Something inside me tells that we, in this respect, still have a strong opponent in Islamic State. IS has turned into a strong marketing machine that tries to draw vulnerable youth into its web by deluding them with visions of an angry dream, the caliphate. As a society, we have to tell those who are prone to extremism an exciting counter-narrative. We have to present them with a counter-offer. This counter-offer should be based on the strength of our societal model, our values, our standards, and our way of life. We have to tell and show our youth that opportunities for a good life are within grasp, but that it's up to them to seize them. I believe that we must develop a clear vision, and one thing is crucial here as far as I'm concerned. And maybe this will be at first view a little bit shocking, but I'm convinced that there is a we and a them in our society. I know very well that you don't may say it, but I say it here. There is a we and a them in our society. However, the division does not run between immigrants and the native population, or between Muslims and not Muslims. There is a division between we, and that are all of those who mean well with our society and its cornerstone, regardless of color or religion. And them, the fraction that wants to destabilize our society with violence, to force a completely superseded image of society upon us. We all know that there is a group of violent extremists we need to fight with all possible legal means. The very existence of this minority group of extremists is a problem we have to take very seriously. It's like a cancer, and what applies to people also applies to the society. If you don't take away a cancer, or at least give radiotherapy, the problem will only grow. In order to do so, we have to continue to pursue a tight security policy. But a good security policy is a matter of finding the right balance. An important question remains, of course, how safe or unsafe should we actually feel 1 year after 22nd of March 2016?
Well, at the European Foundation for Democracy, we had the feeling that the issue of jihadist radicalisation, so violent extremism with an Islamist background, has not been investigated enough. There were still open questions, there were still challenges and discussions that should be deepened. So we partnered with the European Policy Center, which is one of the leading think tanks in Europe. While we at the European Foundation for Democracy, we're an NGO, and we also do policy work, but we also do projects. So we work with teachers and students, sometimes with refugees and social workers in the prevention of radicalization and on integration issues. So the book is a result of a series of events that we had. The first event we had actually on March 22nd, 2016, at the day of the attack in Brussels. We had our first event, which of course was an awkward situation, a terrible situation, emotionally very challenging, but we thought, okay, it has a jihadist background, so let's pursue this project and try to come up with information and research and findings that can be useful for different audiences, for policymakers, members of parliament, members of the bureaucracy that make decisions, but also maybe for citizens who want to learn more about specific issues.
Restez tuned sur AlmouwatinTV pour un nouveau numéro de Crève la bulle, l'Europe c'est la bombe. N'hésitez pas à commenter et envoyer vos suggestions sur Facebook et Twitter, #Crève la bulle.